It is hot, it is summer, and it is barbecue and grilling season. Let's be honest, barbecue can be a sensitive topic. You can't talk about it with just anybody, so I got the best. We had John Shelton Reed and Jim Auchmutey. John's a scholar and author known for his research and writing on Southern culture and foodways, who's authored several books that explore topics ranging from Southern identity to barbecue traditions in America. His work often delves into the historical, social, and cultural aspects of Southern cuisine, and he has been a consultant for Southern Living, Quaker Grits, and has also co founded the Campaign for Real Barbecue. Jim is an award winning journalist and author specializing in food history and Southern culture. He's written extensively on the evolution of Southern food traditions, including barbecue, and has contributed to publications such as the Atlanta Journal Constitution and the New York Times. His investigative approach to food history has shed light on the origins and transformations of Southern culinary practices over time. He's also founded the Southern Foodways Alliance and has won awards for his food writing from the James Beard Foundation and the Association of Food Journalists. He was also a guest curator for the Atlanta History Center's Barbecue Nation exhibit. As you can see, these two are absolutely authorities on the subject, and this was such a different conversation, but one that I thought was just such a blast to have. I hope that you enjoy this very, very fun interview. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host and the founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's Silver. I'm so excited to be chatting with the two of you. Before I get all chatty, because that's what I do, I'm going to turn this over to the two of you and let you introduce yourselves. And John, did you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. Well, I'm John Reed, and reason I'm here is I've written 3 books about barbecue. Before that, I was a college professor, but I retired and get to write about interesting stuff with great tax deductions.
Jim?
My name is Jim Auchmutey. I've written 2 books about barbecue. I'm a journalist in Atlanta, and I'm most recently wrote a book about the history of barbecue in America called Smoke Lore. I always wrote a lot about food history and just food as another window to look at our culture.
One thing I failed to say where I am, and that's I think an important part of this conversation. Jim's in Georgia, you're in suburban Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken, and North Carolina. So I have a particular view of barbecue, and so does Jim.
I have questions about this that we will get to because I know this is a really, honestly, an important part of its history and evolution. I do want to, because you did just bring it up, so, and I'll probably end up mentioning this at the end as well, but for those listening, I will put links to your books and your websites in our show notes so that people can go check those out. John brought something up pre-recording that I think is important that we do start with, because when I originally reached out to John, and I was just kind of laughing with these guys because I said, I bet you probably didn't have recording a podcast on for someone whose brand is called Grand Millennial Lifestyle and has the word grandma in it on their 2024 bingo card, because I know it seems maybe a bit disjointed, but I think it's really interesting to encourage people to talk about and understand a lot of the things that they are experiencing and the places that they're from, and creating an appreciation for that. And one of the reasons I originally reached out was because I thought that here we are in summer. People are grilling quite frequently, which is frequently confused with barbecuing. And that, I think, you could probably speak to this better than I, but my small understanding here is that certain areas utilize those terms interchangeably. Where I'm from, we host barbecues, but we use the grill. You wouldn't say that from a more technical space. So did one of you want to speak to that, or both of you want to chime in with a little bit of help for listeners who can differentiate?
Sure.
Maybe John can tell you about the traditional definition, and I can tell you about the ecumenical modern definition.
Okay. Yeah. Incidentally, I'd never heard the word grand millennial before. So,
A lot of people haven't.
well, I looked it up, and it sounds like a great thing. I'm all for it. But anyway, barbecue historically has meant cooking meat of some kind or other for a long time at low temperature and in the presence of wood smoke. Sometimes it's over the fire, sometimes it's beside the fire, but and sometimes it's pork, sometimes it's beef, sometimes. But the one constant is that you're cooking it with wood at a low temperature, about the temperature of boiling water, maybe a little hotter. And this everybody knows if you cook something for a long time at a low temperature, whether you braise it or barbecue it or whatever, it could take a piece of tough and gnarly meat and make something pretty wonderful out of it. So that's been what it meant. And still in the South, when you say something, you're serving barbecue or you're barbecuing something, that's what it means. Elsewhere, you get outside the South, and I think, unfortunately, increasingly in parts of the South, the definition expanded to include what we would call grilling. That is, putting something over a hot fire, cooking it a short time at a high temperature, hamburgers, steaks, hot dogs, that sort of thing. So as you say, you go out in the backyard and cook hot dogs on your gas grill. You're having a barbecue in Philadelphia, but you're not in North Carolina.
Exactly. It's interesting because I didn't know the difference for a long time.
Well, it's interesting because as barbecue has become a national thing and not just something that's pretty much just found in the traditional hotbeds of the South and the Southwest, it has come to have a broader definition. I always liken it to the word rock and roll, which includes a zillion different things. And one of the reasons we still use the word rock and roll is it became such an umbrella term and is so malleable. Barbecue is kind of like that. It's interesting, the Kansas City Barbecue Association, which is the largest organization of barbecue enthusiasts in the world, with many thousands of members. When they were founded years ago, they actually faced this question: what are we going to call barbecue? Are we going to say, if you're cooking a hot dog on the grill, we're not going to include you? And they decided to have the big tent definition that includes everybody, with the caveat that we're going to try to educate them as they go along.
Does that mean that if I'm in my backyard, but does that mean would you consider that grilling?
What are you cooking?
Usually a burger, sometimes a hot dog. I'm not a big hot dog person.
John and I would call that grilling. Anybody in the South who comes from these traditions would call that grilling, but we recognize that people around the rest of the country have a very malleable use of that word barbecue, and any outdoor thing that gets hot, they call it a barbecue.
Yeah. Of course, some of us think that's wrong, but we recognize that it's a fact.
Yeah. I love it. Since we're on this topic, because I want to get more into the barbecue side of this conversation in a minute, but because we're talking about grilling, it feels important to kind of start a little bit with some cultural stuff. So, it was really interesting to me. I think sometimes we take for granted that a lot of inventions that folks in my generation are so familiar with are actually relatively new. I was flabbergasted to realize that the grill as a tool, a commercial tool, is really more mid-century.
There were grills before that.
Were there? Okay. Talk to me about
grill. It's the portable grill that we think of in the backyard. That widespread use of that was fairly recent. When I grew up, Jim talks about this in his book. He's got a wonderful passage about grilling. Sunset Magazine had designs for this brick or stone grill. I grew up in East Tennessee. We had one of those in our backyard. We never used it. My grandparents put it in, but it. I don't know why they did it, because the fire's down there and the meat's up here, and the kind of thing you can get from Weber these days or some other, that's much more flexible and much more practical. We finally tore brick pit down because it was just in the way.
Allie, the portable grills like you're thinking of, like Charbroil or Weber are the two biggest sellers, Traeger now. All of these things came about right before or right after World War II. But before that, there were a lot of different people would cook on these brick pits, which were very popular in California, and certainly a lot of people in the South had some version of that, or they would cook on, oil drums that had been retrofitted to be barbecue cookers. So the idea of having cookers that you were cooking on in your backyard goes back a ways, certainly to the early years of the 20th century. But the idea that you're doing them in your backyard on things on wheels is really, you said it's a fairly recent phenomenon, but we're talking 75 years ago, 80 years ago.
Well, yeah, in the scheme of a timeline, I consider it fairly recent history. But yes, it has been around for quite a while. I do understand that part.
Right.
Something that I think is important is proper barbecuing, that is cooking with wood smoke at a low temperature and that kind of thing. It's only recently that that's been done on a large scale in people's backyards individually. I mean, historically, it started in big community barbecues where people would gather around and they'd cook whole animals over pits. Advent of the automobile, it moved to restaurants and whatnot, but it most people didn't have the equipment to do it or the urge to do it. If you wanted a barbecue sandwich, you went to the barbecue place and bought one. It's become a hobby now, though, and some people even call it a sport, which is ridiculous. But
well, I mean, the idea of doing it in your backyard is very much a mid-20th century thing. When I was working on Smoke Lore, I went back and looked at every newspaper mention of barbecue in the 1800s that I could find, and I can tell you that the word didn't mean what it means now. The word back then referred to pretty much a big gathering, quite often a political gathering, or some sort of community or church gathering or a union gathering, or just they were big gatherings, like John was saying. And you don't really see the modern sense of the word barbecue. When we use the word now, we usually use it to refer to what you do in your backyard on a grill or a smoker or a restaurant, or the food that's served at those places. And that sense of the word is hardly existent in the 1800s.
If we talk about the shift, is it really just the creation of the portable grill that changed things culturally?
Well, the first shift was the rise of barbecue restaurants. If you go back to the time of the Civil War, you didn't have barbecue restaurants. Barbecues were things that happened at these big events. Plantation barbecues, just any number of things, often written up in the paper. The first restaurants don't really start appearing until the 1880s and 90s, and they're usually outgrowths of meat markets in certain cities in the South and certainly in Texas and the Southwest. And then you start seeing good and proper barbecue restaurants popping up right around the turn of the century. There are two in downtown Atlanta in the city directories, and they're around 1901. Like John was saying, you don't have this really explosion of barbecue restaurants until automobiles become popular. And some of the most beloved barbecue restaurants in the country right now started in the 1920s and 30s, when you started having people hitting the road, and they were usually roadside barbecue places. So the sense of the word actually started changing during that era when barbecue restaurants started becoming a thing.
There are still old-timey places in North Carolina that have curb service. They always have, and they still do.
Yeah.
They don't have car hops exactly. There's a sign on the side of the building that says honk for service, and somebody comes out and takes your order.
Isn't Short Sugars like that?
Yeah. And a couple of places in Lexington, the automobile made this possible on a large scale. Early on, there were sort of pop-ups, at least here in North Carolina, at tobacco auctions or courthouse days.
Yeah.
People put up a tent or some kind of stand and sell barbecue wherever people were gathering for some occasion. They'd hitchhike on that. But some of those operations turned into full-time restaurants, and some of them.
That's Skylight Inn, but that family kind of started this pop-up type stuff, I think, way back when.
And the oldest restaurants in Lexington started as courthouse things, but they got pictures of them in their shed, and then they moved kind of across the street and started a restaurant. There are two of them across the street from each other. They had competing car hops. You know, you pull up and they race to get to your car first.
But it's kind of funny now how things have gone around because a lot of the most interesting new barbecue places opening up, certainly in Metro Atlanta, and I think pretty much everywhere, a lot of them are like either food trucks or pop-ups, where they sort of test out the idea of whether we can actually start paying rent on a storefront and make this a go.
Yeah, like a pilot, like a little.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. You mentioned a couple of things that will require separate questions here, but the one that you brought up was, of course, you're located in different areas, and that got me thinking about regions and region-specific differences in barbecue. It's an extensive list, but I know there's a handful of fairly popular or more well-known regional differences. Is that exclusive to, I'm gonna ask a stupid question, but this is where my knowledge ends. Is that exclusive to the sauce or is that cooking style too? Like, is it both?
Both.
Want to take that, Jim? Yeah, it can be either or both.
There's actually a lot of different barbecue regions in the United States, a lot more than some people think. People will talk about Texas barbecue. Well, Texas has different regions and different barbecue styles. One of my pet peeves is the way that in recent decades, we've come to sort of shorthand barbecue as thinking that there are like these four styles: Memphis, Kansas City, Texas, and Carolina, as it's often called. And those things, there are a lot of other styles. And in those places, certainly in Carolina and Texas, there are different regional styles. And then there are little regionalities in California and in the Pacific Northwest and in a couple of places in the Northeast, which may not meet a Southerner's definition of barbecue. They're sort of grilling things, but they are all part of this sort of smoke and fire cooking world. One of the things I discovered was it's just a lot more complicated than this simplistic shorthand makes it seem. John?
Yeah, not to mention subregions in Kentucky where they're cooking mutton, North Alabama where they're using the sauce based on mayonnaise. And there are lots of micro regions. Tim's quite right. You start enumerating them, you get dozens at least. However, one recent development that I view with disdain is what I call the rise of the International House of Barbecue, which is restaurants that serve all these different styles. You know, pick your sauce, pick your meat, put it together. The customer's always right, and there's a lot of variation. That's not the historic way of doing this. Sam Jones at the Skylight Inn in Ayden, North Carolina, one of the great barbecue places in the country, incidentally. Sam said once, he said, when you come here, it's not what you want, it's how much of it. I mean, they do it their way, whole hog with the vinegar-based sauce, take it or leave it, you know. They've now adjusted some to market realities, and they've got chicken as well for people that don't pork. I mean,
do they do brisket? Do they do brisket, John?
No, they don't touch brisket, or at least not yet. And Sam's very proud of his family's tradition of cooking whole hogs, you know, and they're certainly going to always do that. However, there are places in North Carolina that now do cook brisket, not very well as a rule. Although Daniel Vaughn, the barbecue editor of Texas Monthly, did find a couple of places in North Carolina he didn't turn his nose up at.
One of the things that's happened as barbecue has become more popular, people know a lot more about all these different styles now. And there are a lot more restaurants all over the country that serve these different styles. In some cases, it can be a good thing if they do it well. In a lot of cases, they don't do it very well, and they should leave the brisket to the Texans or to the people in Kansas City, and the people there should leave the pork shoulder to the people in the South. You know, this whole idea of you can get anything everywhere is kind of very current in American culture, and it's certainly the case in barbecue.
Mass marketing. Incidentally, some of the best whole hog barbecue I've had recently was cooked at a place in Portland, Maine, called Wilson County Barbecue. It's run by a guy from Wilson County, North Carolina, and
Oh
he's
my
cooking whole hog over wood. He's doing it exactly right. The iconography is right. Everything about the place is right. It's a better barbecue than you find in Wilson County these days, where most people switch to cooking with gas, which is another abomination we can talk about.
I'm sure we'll talk about that.
We'll be sure to bring that up. You know, it's funny you said, you know, they don't always do it well, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about the beauty of specialization to me is, you know, I get it, because people want convenience. They want a big menu. I think for marketing purposes, you get mass appeal, blah, 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 blah. We go, you know, I just went, again, we're in the Philadelphia suburbs, so we often will go to the Jersey Shore for vacation. We just went Memorial Day weekend with my husband's family. And there was this restaurant that they were all so excited to try. And first thing I said when I pulled up the menu is, this is going to be terrible. And they really wanted to go because it had all these awards. I don't know why it was not good, but it had all these awards. It's been featured on television. I mean, a whole thing. But the menu had Italian, Greek. I mean, we are talking so many different kinds of cuisines, way too many options, which to me is a giant red flag. And it was not good. No one's meal was consistent. It was not a good experience. But that goes back to, you can do all these things, but can you do them well? I'd rather have a smaller menu.
You see a restaurant that says Asian food, you know, and they're serving Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, you know, to stay away from there.
You mentioned, we were just talking region, and this is kind of, again, perhaps a stupid question, but, and kind of a chicken or the egg question. How do regional specialties develop? Like what's the evolution of that? Does it start just with what's around and what people grew up doing and in their community gatherings, and then that just grew to, this is what I'm going to specialize in, this is what I know? Or does it, you know, like, or am I going backwards?
Well, I mean, it often has to do with what the protein available is. Obviously, in Texas, they had a close proximity to a lot more cattle. In the South, pork has always been king. It also has to do with who the people are and what their ethnicity is, and what they're used to doing. So yeah, it has to do with both of those things you're talking about. Anything else, John?
Yeah, these regional differences actually emerged fairly late in the game. Before the Civil War, barbecue was pretty much the same everywhere. They're cooking any kind of meat they can lay their hands on, and they're cooking over an open pit. Sometimes things become available, people incorporate it. We didn't have an east-west distinction in North Carolina until ketchup came along. It was introduced at the Centennial Exposition, and Heinz ketchup was introduced in 1876, and by 1915 or so, people in the western part of North Carolina were putting ketchup in their sauce, you know, which had previously been vinegar and red pepper, not much else. One reason they did this, I'm convinced, is because a lot of Germans out in there in western North Carolina, and this adds an element of sweetness, and it approximates the dish that I've eaten in Bavaria. You know, didn't have red pepper in it, but other than that, it was sweet and sour sauce with pork shoulder. And these Germans, you look at the churches, they're Lutheran churches out there, the same place you get Piedmont style barbecue. It's not an accident. There are also Germans in Texas. That's another long story. But Texas barbecue, it's not accidental that they're serving brisket and sausage in Texas. Up in Kentucky, I mentioned mutton. Around Owensboro, there's a mutton tradition that's held down there longer than anywhere else. It often served at parish barbecues of German Catholics who are numerous in that area. Start looking, you find Germans everywhere right there.
We have a big Dutch. I mean, I'm about 45 minutes outside of Amish country. We have a big German influence out here too.
Well, Piedmont, North Carolina, and South Carolina was settled by people coming down from Pennsylvania, Scotch, Irish, and Germans. Those divisions are still important within North Carolina. They're starting to get blurred these days. But
another thing that we should talk about is the influence of African Americans. An awful lot of early barbecue was cooked by enslaved Africans. many of whom had spent time in the Caribbean.
Mm.
And when you're talking about plantation barbecues at George Washington's, Mount Vernon, or things like that, plantation barbecues in general, think about Gone with the Wind. Those were pretty much Black people doing that cooking. It doesn't mean that there weren't white people cooking barbecue back then too. I mean, my own family roots go way back into that period, and we always cooked barbecue. But the people who had a really outsized hand in sort of forming the tradition of an American barbecue, I think there's a lot. You could say that a lot of African Americans had a lot to do with that. They brought a sense of how to season things. They had come into contact. I mean, they already knew some hot things and some interesting spices and seasonings from Africa, and they certainly encountered a lot more of them in the Caribbean. So by the time you got them sitting there cooking that 12 Oaks barbecue and Gone with the Wind, they've got a certain hand at seasoning that probably the British and Scots-Irish in that area had a little bit different idea of seasoning.
Mm. And then in the Deep South, of course, you have ribs or barbecue. I mean, and that spread to Kansas City from Memphis. Yeah, here in North Carolina, it was a byproduct of whole hog cooking, but typically you didn't go to a barbecue place and order ribs. It just wasn't. You wanted ribs, you went to a rib joint.
Well,
like that. Ribs weren't.
If you're talking about specialization, this is actually a really good example, because when I was growing up, and certainly I think, John, when you were growing up, generally speaking, if you wanted ribs, in the South, you usually went to a Black barbecue place. If you wanted chopped barbecue, whether it was whole hog or pork shoulders or hams, that was much more typical of a white barbecue place. A lot of white barbecue places didn't even do ribs. And some of them still don't. One of my favorite barbecue places, one of the oldest barbecue places in Georgia, is Fresh Air in Jackson, Georgia. They don't do ribs, at least not the last time I checked. It wasn't part of their tradition. But if you wanted ribs, you'd go to probably a Black-owned place in the city, like the Auburn Avenue Rib Shack. Any number of places like that, and that's gotten really blurred, because now, of course, a lot of barbecue places, as part of the philosophy of serving everything that they can get their hands onto, they're going to have brisket and ribs.
Yeah.
Yes, Skylight Inn that I mentioned earlier, they don't serve ribs. I mean, they're cooking whole hogs, so if meat turns up in the chop, but the ribs themselves don't. And a lot of these places in Eastern North Carolina and Georgia and Deep South, white-owned places, in the old days serving white customers, but the Black folks were doing the cooking. That's another difference between Eastern North Carolina and Piedmont. Both those restaurants are run by white folks, and white folks cooking the meat too.
I have a quick barbecue story. When Hank Aaron, the great baseball player, was starting when he moved from the Milwaukee Braves to Atlanta and came to Atlanta and started making some money, one of the first things he did was try to get into the restaurant business. He invested in a barbecue restaurant in Southwest Atlanta, an area that was becoming increasingly Black because of white flight. And his business partners in it were white. And they wanted to open a barbecue place in Southwest Atlanta that basically had chopped pork. And Hank kept telling them, ribs, this is a neighborhood for ribs. And they didn't listen to him, and the restaurant closed in less than a year.
This is fascinating. I'm finding this fascinating because this is exactly what I wanted to talk. It's so much more than meets the eye. And I think it also helps, honestly, if I'm a food person, I'm not going to lie. And so if I'm traveling, I don't want to go to the place that gives me something that's not going to be a little more authentic or that isn't done well. So this is the kind of stuff you keep in mind, right? Like that people don't sometimes even think about. They just hear what's marketed more so now. I think that it's taken on such like a tourist marketing shift.
I was just gonna say, let me plug the Campaign for Real Barbecue, which a couple of us founded some years ago. If you go on the web, TrueQ, TRUECUE.org, ORG, TrueQ.org. It's the website of the Campaign for Real Barbecue. And among other things on that site are lists of restaurants in I think 5 states now that cook the old-fashioned way entirely with wood. Okay, and that's not a bad place to start if you're looking for good barbecue places. You do that, you won't get a gasser, which is often the case in North Carolina. More barbecue places, so-called barbecue places in North Carolina cook with gas now than cook with wood. And there's no law. You can cook anything. You can cook it in a crock pot, call it barbecue if you want. But
I know places like that.
Campaign for Real Barbecue, QQ.org. Check it out.
We should probably do a little context here about why more people are cooking with gas. It should be said that cooking barbecue the traditional way over wood and over embers is very labor intensive. It's a very sort of craft thing. It often involves very long hours. You're paying people to do this work. There's always a fire risk. There's any number of barbecue places that John and I could tick off over the years that have burned down. But it is the right way to do it. It's the traditional way to do it. But a lot of people have tried to come up with workarounds. And so some people cook barbecue on gas now and then try to impart the barbecue flavors simply with sauce. A lot of people in our modern world equate barbecue with the flavor of that sauce, which John, I would tell you is barbecue sauce can be really delicious, but that's a mistake to think that that's the barbecue.
Often in Texas, they don't even serve it with sauce, but that's barbecue because they've cooked it with wood.
Right. Yeah, but there are a lot of gassers in Texas too. So people are trying to do it easier. They're trying to do it less expensively. One of the things that's popped up in recent years have been these hybrid cookers that are basically, they involve wood smoke and infusion, but they have a gas element that maintains the heat. So some people would look at that and think that that's cheating. Some people would look at that and think that it's a reasonable adaptation to the modern world. I would say this about the hybrid cookers, which actually the majority of barbecue places in America today cook with hybrid cookers that use both smoke and gas. And they are only as good as the people who are using them. Yes. People who know how to use them and still get a lot of smoke flavor infused into the meat. A lot of good places do that. And I don't have a huge problem with that, although I would rather it being done strictly traditionally. And then you have other places who basically cook the meat on gas and have a little touch of hickory or something there. And it's better than none, but it's still not the real thing.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the people that do it right. Use gas to ignite the fire and keep a constant temperature. And,
right.
Basically it's, I admire the people that don't do that, do it the old way. But another problem with cooking it the old way is there's an element of inconsistency there. You can have good days and bad days that you don't have if you're cooking with a gas cooker. I mean, it's uniform. You could say uniformly mediocre, but it's uniform. It doesn't vary. Yeah. And interesting thing that come along that lets people wood cook barbecue in their backyards pretty easily. I don't know how I feel about this. It's a company named Traeger that's devised this pellet cooker. You get little pellets of compressed sawdust and a thermostat, and it feeds the sawdust to maintain a constant temperature. And I guess you could say you're cooking with wood. It's sawdust is wood, and you can cook pretty good barbecue this way. Again, I say I don't know how I feel about this. I think it's got a future. I actually went out and bought some Traeger stock, which promptly tanked, but that's another story.
No, actually, John, I think that was a good idea. The pellet grill sector is the fastest growing sector in the barbecue world right now. And Traeger is, I'm doing a story for Atlanta Magazine right now about the 50th anniversary of Big Green Egg. And what they really look at is Traeger. Because Big Green Egg was the cool guy grill for the last 20 years, and Traeger's starting to overtake them as the cool guy grill. And I mean, I walked into a Home Depot the other day and half the damn grills there were Traegers.
Is that right? Yeah. Yep. Well, one thing about it is you can cook pretty good barbecue in your backyard with bags of sawdust pellets.
Well, they're compressed wood is what they would call them.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got a proper smoker in my backyard, I'm proud to say, but it is a pain in the neck, you know. I don't
Yeah.
fire it up. Don't fire it up every week, you know. You save it for special occasions. It's like the old time community barbecues. Got to be celebrating something.
Yeah, yeah. If you want dinner on a Wednesday night and you want to put some flame on a piece of salmon, I just don't even want to tell you what I do.
Liquid smoke. Now that we talk about liquid smoke.
No, I don't do that.
Oh man, out here the big one right now is these Blackstone griddle grill things. Have you seen it? It's basically, oh my gosh, it's what everyone around here right now has. It's my my dad just got one. They're just giant griddle tops. And then it's gas, you just flip it on. And I guess it's nice because it's like a big cooktop.
Mhm.
But I don't know,
Is this indoor or outdoor?
outdoor. It's outdoor.
Outdoor.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to it. You can look at it. It's different. I mean, I get it because it's convenient in certain, depending on what you're making.
Well, Allie, one of the things that's interesting about a lot of the high-end barbecue cookers that you find now is how much they invest in, apps on your phone to control it.
Yes.
Basically, the idea seems to be that you turn it on and then you can control the thing through your phone and you don't have to get involved with it. And I guess that appeals to some people, but I don't quite get that because to me, you're taking what should be a profoundly analog experience and you're making it a digital experience. To me, if you're cooking outside, if you're doing barbecue or grilling, the whole idea is to sit there and engage with it and have people buzzing around watching you do it. It's not to sort of say, I'm going to push a button here and it's taken care of.
Yeah, that's Traeger, by the way. You can walk away.
Well, no, I know Traeger. Well, Traeger has a whole wide variety of things, but you can do that on Traegers. And there's some other there's a high-end grill maker in Augusta that's really big on that too. And I've encountered them in several places. And I mean, when I go to a barbecue gathering, usually wanting to hear all about how all the work you've done there and being the pit master and all there is a central part of it. I don't quite understand this thing about I pushed a button and now let's go have a drink inside.
Yeah. Well, I look at it, it removes, honestly, most of the experience, right? Like I would look at that as such a sensory experience that you're not actually a part of in a lot of ways because you're just it's almost like, why not just go buy it somewhere or like go sit down somewhere and have it if you're not really gonna, it's like the outdoor crock pot kind of, it's like if it's gonna do all the work and you're not gonna, you can just walk away and not be part of it.
Yeah, I don't really, I'm not
Yeah.
enamored of self-driving car barbecues.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You did bring something up that was part of what I was going to ask earlier, which is tradition, family owned and generational barbecue and barbecue joints that are family owned. I mean, you don't see a lot of that these days.
Let me say a word about that. You're starting to see barbecue chains now, which we didn't have before. We had a few unsuccessful attempts at it, but my idea of a proper barbecue place, it's owned by a local family, a local individual. Probably might very well have the owner's name on it. It's Johnson's Barbecue, and ideally it's passed down in the family. Now, that's often doesn't happen. I can think of a couple of cases in North Carolina where you're now in the third generation. But one of my favorite barbecue places just closed, Allen and Son, here in Chapel Hill. Keith Allen made enough money and worked long enough. He tired of working 12-hour days and retired and closed the place to go hunting. He didn't train any successors, so it's gone. It was he cooked the meat and his wife made the pies. It was that kind of place. Occasionally usually they had a one waitress.
It's tough to keep a barbecue place going for multiple generations. And I suppose it's dying off in a sense, but when you think about some of the most famous barbecue places in America that we know of, they are family places that have lasted generations. McClard's in Hot Springs, Arkansas, Big Bob Gibson's in Decatur, Alabama, Fresh Air in Jackson, Georgia.
Skylight Inn, keep talking about
Skylight Inn in Aden, North Carolina.
Stamy.
Yeah, or Kreitz Market in Lockhart, Texas, or Smitty's in Lockhart, Texas, for that matter. A lot of the places that are really landmarks of the barbecue geography are family owned. But you're perfectly right that a lot of them, it's very tough to find that second, third, and fourth generation who want to keep it going. And there has indeed been a growth in barbecue chains. And it's kind of odd because, some of the earliest franchise restaurants in America back in the 1920s and 30s were barbecue places. They were actually more prevalent than hamburger places back in those days. The Pig and Whistle chain, for instance, was one that started back then. So you had a sort of a burst of barbecue chains early on, but then they were totally supplanted by the burger places because burgers are more are fast food as opposed to slow food. Barbecue is the definition of slow food, and so they lent themselves more to standardization. McDonald's is the best example. McDonald's started in San Bernardino, California in 1942 as a barbecue drive-in primarily. And several years later, they retooled as a hamburger place and became the McDonald's we know. Not a lot of barbecue chains were very successful in the post-war period, but there's been an explosion of them recently. And I have to say, some of them are actually good, but they are chains. So if you love this history and if you love the sort of family aspect of that history, like John and I both clearly do, you have a little regret of the growth of the chains, even if some of them are doing a really good job.
Like, I think a lot about documentation and preservation. Are we losing? I mean, I know there's a lot of people are barbecuing, right? Like I see stories all the time. I see the cookbooks. I love it all. But are we because these things are not continued? In my mind, that means these things are not being passed down. So are we losing like the traditional ways of doing these things?
Let me tell you what I'm going to miss because it's going and will probably be gone. And that's the kind of place like Stamey's in Greensboro, where you could walk in and buy a wonderful barbecue sandwich. Somebody spent all night cooking that meat, and it cost you less than a Big Mac, $3.75 last time I was there. And one result of that is all kinds of people go there. You've got lawyers, you've got construction workers, you've got cowboys and hippies, all kinds of people eat there, and it's a place where the community gathers. It's like those old time community barbecues in colonial days. Everybody in town goes there. What's happening now, and it's understandable, is prices are going up. I mean, it's ridiculous that Stamey's charges so little for this product, considering what went into it. And I imagine their prices go up. New places are opening; they're charging $10 or $12 for a barbecue sandwich, and some of the clientele of the old place don't go there. The atmosphere is wrong. It's if they're old signs on the wall, they came from some antique shop. The ambiance, excuse the word, is thoroughly middle class, and that and the prices keep a lot of people out.
I think John's right about that. A lot of the old time barbecue places where you would see a mixture of folks like that. The one that comes to mind for me in Atlanta was Harold's Barbecue, which lasted until about 2012 down near the federal penitentiary on the south side. That used to be a place where you saw just a real, construction workers, cops, lawyers from downtown, journalists from downtown would be eating there together in a place that had knotty pine paneling and things on the wall that had been there long enough to get a sort of a creosote discoloration on them. So, and that one went by the wayside because Harold died and the children didn't want to keep running it the way it had been run before. And he's right that a lot of the best barbecue places that have opened in recent years, and I actually feel pretty good about the future of the craft because there are a lot of people who are interested in barbecue. There are a lot of chefy types who are very interested in barbecue, but they tend to, when they open up places, and some of them are the best barbecue places in America now, they tend to be sort of these boutique chef-driven barbecue places, really. And they are inevitably, the atmosphere is a little different. They're inevitably more expensive. You can look at the popularity of brisket. It seems like every barbecue place in America right now wants to say that they're Texas style and they want to have brisket. And some of them do a good job with it, and some of them don't do a good job with it. But there are so much interest in brisket right now that brisket prices have gone through the roof, and people in Texas hate that.
I'm gonna brag. My wife and daughters 3 or 4 years ago sent me to brisket camp at Texas A&M. You know, 3 days of intensive brisket studies, and Aaron Franklin was all the greats of Texas barbecue were there as instructors. I came home and I cooked the best brisket I've ever eaten. It was so good. I'm scared to try it again because it it's good. So,
Wouldn't you hate to have to get that right every day?
no, no.
Man.
Anyhow, there's a lot of skill involved, and I admire it. Just as I admire people who cook whole hogs. I'm scared of that myself because it's so easy to go wrong, and you go wrong, you've wasted an entire 100-pound hog. That's a
and that 100-pound hog isn't cheap either.
That's right. So, but these new places that Jim's talking about, with the sort of haute cuisine approach to barbecue, they've got wine lists, they've got valet parking, you know, blueberries in their sauce, you know, it's and I occasionally like to eat there because it's good food, you know, but it's if it has any relation to tradition, it's kind of there are exceptions, but most of these places, if they're riffing on tradition, if they have any relation to it at all. A few of them, take it like Aaron Franklin I mentioned, take a tradition and try to perfect it. He's in Austin and is the man on brisket. He got the James Beard Award for it too. He really cooks magnificent brisket. It's about as good as it gets, as good as it can get. But so some of these places are hardcore tradition, and they're doing it right. They're doing it even more right than the people in the tradition, if you want to think of it that way. But their prices are high enough. The problem we had earlier, I mentioned earlier, exists.
It's interesting because you touched on the ambiance of some of these family-owned, smaller establishments, been there forever. I think sometimes that's a part of the experience, right? And it kind of, you shift away from that. It changes. I don't know. I think I would have a harder, I mean, of course I could enjoy a barbecue sandwich, I guess, by candlelight, but I think it would be a whole lot better with like some wet naps on a picnic table. I just, you know, I think that's part of your experience sometimes. I don't know. That's a cultural shift too.
I wish more people felt like you do, Allie.
I think there are a lot of people who hold on to heritage and tradition and don't even know that they're doing it until you start to have these conversations and you realize, oh, I do appreciate those things. And I do, you know, want to see them for future generations. And so that's a big part of what this is all about and why I'm happy that you two are willing to chat with me about this as barbecue experts. What are some of your go-to favorite places that are still around today if people wanted to check them out?
We talk about a place that I go to every time I'm anywhere near it, and that's the Rendezvous in Memphis. It's a rib place. It was run by a guy named Charlie Virgos, who's Greek, and in the late 40s, he started messing around with rubs. He stopped putting sauce on his ribs and started rubbing them with spices, including things like oregano and thyme and sort of Mediterranean spices. And basically, Charlie Virgos invented what's now called Memphis dry ribs. You go to Memphis, you can get wet ribs or dry ribs. The dry ribs are knockoffs of what Charlie Virgos did at the Rendezvous. It's also a wonderful setting. It's kind of down in a basement, big basement. It's got waiters who look like they've been there forever. You know, it's a noisy, convivial kind of place, and it's almost a cliche, but I like it. People sing songs about it, you know, but it's certainly famous and deservedly so. That's one of my favorites. Your turn, Jim.
Well, I'll tell you about another place in Memphis that's not nearly as famous as the Rendezvous, although it's gotten some attention in recent years. And that's Payne's Barbecue. Payne's Barbecue is on the south side, not far from the Stax Museum of American Soul Music, which I highly recommend. And it's on Lamar Boulevard, which used to be the U.S. highway coming in from Tupelo. I can always imagine Gladys and Vernon and Elvis driving down the highway, moving from Tupelo to Memphis in the late 40s, coming down that road. But it's in an old gas station there. It started in the 1970s. And the fellow who founded it, Horton Payne, he died very few years after they opened. And his widow, Flora Payne, and her children took over the place, and they have made it into, it is not a large barbecue establishment like the Rendezvous, which I always also enjoy going to. It's just this little place where you walk in, you order the sandwich, and then you hear them going whack, 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 whack as they're mixing in the outside and the inside meat, and they serve it with this spicy coleslaw. It is my favorite pork sandwich anywhere.
Do you put your coleslaw on your sandwich?
Yes.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Okay. Just curious. I do too most of the time, but I didn't know if there was a right or a wrong way.
No, there's no right or wrong way. The two places that are really associated with coleslaw and chopped barbecue sandwiches are North Carolina and Memphis. And I do it that way sometimes. If I get a barbecue plate and there's coleslaw on it, particularly if it's a little bit of a creamy coleslaw, I might get some saltines and do little canapes with the barbecue and the I think coleslaw goes great together with barbecue, whether it's actually under a bun or whether you're doing it some other way.
Yeah, I certainly push it around with my fork, so I'm getting some of each in a bite, but
That's right. Yeah. The two of them together, it's just a great mixture of textures and flavors and temperatures, actually.
Wilbur Shirley ran a place called Wilbur's in Goldsboro, North Carolina. He said once that he wouldn't sell barbecue to somebody that didn't take coleslaw with it. That's what God intended, was coleslaw with your barbecue. That's a story there too. Wilbur, they built a bypass around Goldsboro. Took a lot of his people used to stop there on the way to the beach, and they built a bypass, and his business suffered. And he got behind on his taxes, and basically they closed him down for not paying his taxes.
They'll do that.
Yeah, and some people, some patriots in Goldsboro said this isn't right. They got together, bought it, reopened it, kept him around as sort of a eminence grise, sit there and talk to people. He died soon after that, but they're in business now. Wilbur's is in business, and it's become sort of a destination, which is how it's going to stay alive. People are going to have to get off the bypass and go in to eat there. It's not going to survive just on local trade. But anyhow, I ate there the other day, and people argue about this now. Of course, is it as good as it was? I think it was. I think it is as good as it was, but there are reputable people who disagree.
And that's a big part of barbecue is debating about all this.
Yeah. People do enjoy putting other people's barbecue down,
Yes.
Yeah.
But, the truth is, I like all kinds of barbecue in their place. I like Texas barbecue when I'm at Central Texas barbecue when I'm in Austin. I even like the stuff with mustard on it in South Carolina, Sweatman's in Holly Hill. Every kind of barbecue I like when it's in its native setting, with the possible exception of the mutton that they serve up in Owensboro, which I'm still not sure about.
They can keep it.
Yeah, they serve it with a sauce that's it seems to be mostly Worcestershire sauce.
They call it Kentucky black dip. They call it.
Yeah. I think it's mostly designed to disguise the flavor of mutton.
And you mentioned coleslaw, so this feels like an important question to raise as we end here. Do you prefer a little more mayonnaise, or a little sweeter, a little more vinegary?
Again, it depends where I am.
Right where you are? Okay.
North
If
Carolina.
I'm in Memphis, I expect it to be sort of a little bit sweet and creamy, with the exception of Payne's, where it's mustardy and hot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll say this: if you're putting it on the sandwich, I actually like it to be a little bit creamier. If you're putting it on the side, I like it not to be creamy. I like it to be more like the Carolina style. But you know, they're used to putting that style on sandwiches in Carolina. So
Yeah. Jim knows better, but he just made a mistake. There are two kinds of Carolina slaw. Just to say two kinds.
oh, I know.
Yeah, I said you know better. In the Piedmont, it's a weird kind of slaw that I've never run into anywhere else. It's basically takes the barbecue sauce, which is red from ketchup and hot from pepper. I mean, the proportions are different, but
It's pale pink.
what goes on in the slaw is hot and vinegar, and I've never run into it anywhere else. Most places, the coleslaw is kind of a complement, you know, offsets the heat of the barbecue. In the Piedmont, it just piles more on. It's more of the same. You know?
That's funny.
I like that.
We got to do something with all this red sauce.
Yeah, they're like, where else could we put this? That's great. We could talk for days, but this has been a really fun conversation. I appreciate the both of you taking the time. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll make sure, I mean, we'll consolidate a list of some of the places that have come up throughout the conversation so people can find it all in one place. Your websites plus the website that you mentioned, True Q, and link to all your book. I mean, you have so many good things. So folks who are listening, please check out the show notes so that you can explore everything that we're talking about here today and offshoots of this conversation as well, because I know that you both have taken care of that. You've taken the guesswork out of it for everyone. So thank you. We will hopefully chat again sometime soon.
Ali, thank you so much for being interested in this and giving me a chance to preach.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie. This was fun. And John, very good to see you.
Great to see you, Jim, as always.
Y'all take care.